You know what cut the deepest? Watching that smug grin on Jack's face as he stood in my living room, my own damn house, dismissing every piece of my life like it was trash. He looked at my old recliner, the faded family photos on the mantel, and with that little snort under his breath, he made it clear. To him, I was just some washed-up retiree from Detroit. He thought he could take my daughter, spin her into his glittering world, and make me irrelevant. What Jack didn't know was that I'd spent 40 years reading men like him, greedy, arrogant, careless with other people's trust. And that night, staring at him across the table, I made myself a promise. He'd regret underestimating me. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you're listening in the comments. Christmas Eve in Detroit has a strange way of magnifying every sound. The snow outside muffled the world, but inside, you could hear the scrape of silverware against plates and the tension in the air as clear as church bells. My daughter, Sophia, glowed with excitement, leaned close to Jack, hanging on every word he said about his company. Lux Events, the premier agency for the Midwest elite. He strutted through his stories like a salesman on a late-night infomercial. Numbers, names, deals. He tossed them around like poker chips. But I caught the cracks. A slip here, a contradiction there. And the way he glanced at me, like a hawk making sure its prey stayed quiet. I knew he saw my suspicion. Sophia's eyes sparkled with pride. My brother raised his glass. Even the cousins nodded, buying into Jack's golden boy act. But me? I'd lived too long in boardrooms to be dazzled by a cheap light show. My gut told me something was rotten under that polished smile. Jack leaned back in his chair, his hand on my daughter's shoulder, and said, "Not everyone's cut out for success, Stephen. Some people just settle." He didn't need to look at me when he said it. Everyone at the table knew who the jab was for. The room filled with polite laughter, but my ears burned. I forced a smile, sipped my coffee, and stayed quiet. Because sometimes silence isn't surrender, it's strategy. And that's when it hit me. If Jack thought I'd sit back while he toyed with Sophia's future, he was dead wrong. What he didn't realize was that I still had one thing he'd never see coming: experience. And I was about to put it to work. When I made the call the next morning, I knew the game had changed forever. The morning after that dinner, I sat at my kitchen table, staring at the steam rising from my black coffee. The old clock on the wall ticked louder than usual, like it was reminding me I didn't have the luxury of time. Sophia's laughter from last night kept echoing in my head, tangled with Jack's smug little quips. I'd seen men like him before: shiny shoes, empty promises, always play with other people's futures like poker chips. But this time it wasn't just some client or a faceless boardroom. This was my daughter, and I wasn't about to let her walk blindfolded into the fire. I pulled out my worn leather address book, the one I'd carried since my days on the road, building restaurant chains across the Midwest. Most people my age wouldn't know where to start, but I had a name, a friend, Gabriel. We'd shared late nights over whiskey, closing deals no one thought possible. Now, he was high up at a consulting firm, the kind of guy who could see through a glossy balance sheet the way a hunter spots tracks in fresh snow. "Gabe," I said when he answered, my voice low, steady. "I need a favor. Quiet one. Lux Events. I want to know what's real and what's smoke." There was a pause, then that familiar chuckle. "You never call unless there's blood in the water, Steve. Give me a few days." I hung up, but my hands didn't stop trembling. Not from fear, from resolve. Because if I was right, this wouldn't just be a bad investment or a flaky business. It would be proof. Proof that Jack was nothing more than a con man dressed in a tailored suit. Snow kept falling outside, covering the city in white. I watched a neighbor shovel his driveway, kids tossing snowballs in the distance. Normal life. But mine had shifted. I wasn't just a father anymore. I was a man on a mission. And in that quiet moment, I knew. When the truth came back, it wouldn't just shake Jack's shiny little empire. It would shatter it. The only question was, would Sophia believe me when she saw the cracks? 3 nights later, my phone buzzed just past midnight. Gabriel never called late unless it mattered. I slipped out of bed, careful not to wake the house, and answered in a whisper. "Steve," he said, his tone stripped of any humor. You were right. Lux Events is a house of cards. He didn't waste time with pleasantries. He laid out plain. Unpaid loans stacked higher than their holiday invoices, client complaints hidden behind glossy ads, and inflated numbers cooked to impress investors. On paper, they looked golden. In reality, they were bleeding out. I pressed the phone tighter to my ear, staring into the dark kitchen. How bad? Bad enough that if one more client pulls out, they're finished. And your future son-in-law? He's been covering it with charm and smoke. I sat down hard, the chair creaking under me. My instincts had been right, but hearing it confirmed. It was like a gut punch, and a relief rolled into one. Thanks, Gabe. I owe you one. You don't owe me anything, he said, but you'd better be careful. Guys like Jack, when they're cornered, they bite. After the call, I poured myself a drink, bourbon neat. The amber glow in a glass caught the Christmas lights from the window, flickering like a warning. This wasn't just about bad business. It was about power, image, control, and Jack had his hooks deep into Sophia. I thought about her smile, how she believed in the way kids believe in fairy tales. If I walked in with numbers and spreadsheets, she'd see me as the villain. Jack had already poisoned the well, whispering that I was stuck in the past, jealous of his success. I took a long sip and set the glass down with a thud. No, this wasn't about waving paperwork. This was about timing, about striking when his mask was firmly in place, surrounded by the people he most wanted to impress. And that's when I knew, if I was going to break him, I couldn't just expose the numbers. I had to hit him where it hurt the most, his pride. Because for men like Jack, humiliation is the one debt they can never repay. The first chance came quicker than I expected. A week later, Sophia invited me to experience Jack's world, as she called it. Lux Events was hosting a winter gala at a downtown hotel. Big lights, champagne fountains, the whole 9 yards. I told her I'd come. Truth was, I needed to see the machine up close. Walking into that ballroom was like stepping into a different planet. Crystal chandeliers glared down. A string quartet played carols no one was listening to, and waiters in stiff tuxedos floated around like ghosts. On the surface, it looked polished, but years of running restaurants had trained my eye. I saw it right away. Plates coming out cold, servers missing cues, guests looking irritated while pretending to smile for cameras. The seams were showing. I stood near the back, observing, when Jack spotted me. His face tightened for a split second before he put on that dazzling grin and strutted over. Well, if it isn't my favorite critic, he said loud enough for half the room to hear. Couldn't resist checking out how the big leagues do it. I kept my voice calm, just here to support Sophia. But Jack wasn't looking for calm. He wanted blood. He raised his glass, clinked it against mine, and sneered. Careful not to get lost, Steve. This isn't your little neighborhood diner crowd. A few guests chuckled. I felt the sting, but I didn't bite. Instead, I scanned the room again, saw a tray of hors d'oeuvres dropped, a guest shaking their head. Champagne spilled down a tux. The cracks were widening. I leaned closer and said quietly, Funny thing about the big leagues, Jack. The higher you climb, the harder the fall. His smile faltered for half a beat. Then, like a switch, he turned to the crowd. You hear that? My future father-in-law thinks we're heading for a fall. Maybe he's just jealous. Laughter rippled through the group. Sophia's eyes darkened, embarrassed. My chest burned, but I stayed steady. This wasn't the time to strike. Not yet, because the real show would come when everyone least expected it. And Jack? He just handed me the stage. 2 days after that gala, Sophia showed up at my door. She didn't even step inside, just stood there in the cold, her arms crossed tight against her coat. Snowflakes caught in her hair, and her eyes had that guarded look I hadn't seen since she was a teenager. Dad, she said flatly, Jack told me what you said. Why are you trying to embarrass him? Why are you trying to embarrass me? The words cut deeper than I expected. I opened my mouth, searching for the right response. But all I saw was how much she wanted to believe him. It wasn't just love. It was the illusion he'd sold her. Sophia, I began carefully. I've seen men like Jack my whole life. He's not what he pretends to be. His company. She raised her hand like a stop sign. No, I don't want to hear it. You've never liked him, and now you're digging around in his business? You're supposed to support me, Dad, not tear me down in front of everyone. Her voice cracked on that last word, but she held her chin high. That hurt the most. Seeing my daughter defend the very man who was setting her up for heartbreak. I stepped back, letting the winter air rush between us. I'm not tearing you down, sweetheart. I'm trying to protect you. That's what fathers do. She shook her head, eyes brimming but defiant. No, Dad, that's what control looks like. And just like that, she turned and walked away, her boots crunching against the ice until the sound disappeared. I stood frozen in the doorway, the warmth of the house at my back and the bitter wind in my face. For the first time, I felt the weight of isolation pressing down on me. Jack had done more than win her trust. He'd turned her against me. But instead of breaking me, that moment hardened something inside. If he thought he'd silence me, he hadn't learned a damn thing about who I was. Because sometimes the sharpest blade isn't anger. It's patience. And I was ready to wait for the perfect moment to cut through his lies. Weeks passed in silence. Sophia didn't call, didn't text. Christmas lights went up all over the neighborhood, glowing reds and greens against the snow. But inside my house it felt darker than ever. Every evening I sat at the same kitchen table, bourbon in hand, staring at the empty chair where she used to sit when she dropped by after work. The silence was a punishment, and Jack was the warden holding the keys. But silence has its uses. It gives you time to think, to sharpen your weapons. I pulled Gabriel's report back out. Pages filled with numbers, complaints, contracts on the brink of collapse. It wasn't just a bad quarter. Lux Events was built on quicksand, and Jack was strutting around like he owned the Empire State Building. Then, just as I started to believe I might spend Christmas alone, the envelope arrived. Ivory paper, gold lettering, thick enough to scream money. You are cordially invited to the Lux Events Christmas Gala. My name was written in elegant script, like I was some honored guest. But I knew better. This was Jack's stage, his playground. And Sophia's handwriting on the note inside told me everything. Please come, Dad. For me. I set the invitation down, the corner catching the light. A laugh escaped my throat. Low, grim, determined. Jack wanted me there, probably thinking he could parade his success and make me look small one last time. But invitations can work both ways. A man who builds his kingdom on lies should never invite a critic into the throne room. I tucked the envelope into my coat pocket and whispered to the empty kitchen, Merry Christmas, Jack. Because what he didn't realize was that this wasn't just his party anymore. It was going to be my battlefield. The night of the gala, Detroit looked like a snow globe shaken by a restless hand. Streets glistened under fresh powder, headlights bouncing off icy patches. I parked 2 blocks from the venue, choosing to walk over valet. Less attention, more time to steady myself. The invitation felt heavy in my pocket, but not as heavy as the weight in my chest. The hotel loomed ahead, wrapped in strings of gold lights like a gift nobody could afford. Inside, the ballroom pulsed with holiday music, laughter, the clinking of glasses. People draped in designer suits and glittering gowns circled the room, their smiles wide, their eyes constantly scanning to see who was watching. I spotted Sophia across the room. She looked radiant in a deep emerald dress, her smile warm but strained. When she saw me, she lit up, and for a second, it was just us again, father and daughter. But then Jack slid in beside her, hand on her back, eyes locking on mine with the satisfaction of a predator guarding its prize. Stephen, he said, voice dripping with charm as he crossed the room. I'm glad you made it. Sophia was worried you'd be too uncomfortable. I gave him a thin smile. Wouldn't miss it. He leaned closer, lowering his voice. Good. Tonight, you'll see how real success looks. Maybe it'll teach you when it's time to step aside. The arrogance rolled off him like cheap cologne. Around us, the party shimmered, but I kept my focus. Guests laughed, but I watched their eyes, catching frustration at slow service, overhearing mutters about prices, about broken promises. Lux Events had dressed a room in gold, but underneath, the cracks were showing bigger than ever. Jack raised his glass, ready to make a toast, his voice booming. To Lux Events, the finest name in celebrations, and a family joining us tonight. All eyes turned to me as he smirked, lifting his glass higher. Even skeptics can learn a thing or two from greatness. The room chuckled. Sophia looked down, embarrassed. And me? I tightened my grip on the bourbon in my hand and thought, careful what you toast to, Jack. Sometimes the glass shatters before you can drink. Jack's toast lingered in the air like smoke, thick and suffocating. Guests clapped politely, though I noticed more than a few rolling their eyes once his back was turned. That was the thing about arrogance. It never hid as well as its owner thought it did. I moved through the crowd, listening more than speaking. Years of boardrooms had taught me that people reveal more in whispers than in speeches. Near the dessert table, two women muttered about their table arriving late, the food being cold. By the bar, a man in a velvet jacket grumbled that he'd been overcharged for his company's holiday party. Every word was another crack in Jack's glass castle. But the real blow came when I slipped out to the service hallway. Old habits die hard. I'd always had a knack for checking the engine room of any operation, and what I saw confirmed everything Gabriel's report had told me. Staff scrambling, trays dropped, a manager barking orders with panic in his voice. The whole place was held together with duct tape and bravado. "Sir, you can't be back here." A young waiter, barely old enough to shave, tried to block me. Before I could answer, Jack stormed down the hall, his face red with fury. "What the hell are you doing snooping around, Stephen?" His voice echoed against the tiles. "I was just looking for the restroom," I said evenly. Jack sneered. "Don't play dumb. You're here to sabotage me, to poison Sophia against me. Well, not this time." He turned to the staff watching from the doorway. "This man is not welcome here. Escort him out." The words sliced through me, not because of the insult, but because Sophia appeared just then, her face stricken. "Dad, what's going on?" Jack put on a performance instantly, slipping an arm around her shoulders. "Your father doesn't trust me, sweetheart. He's been spying on us." Her eyes darted between us, torn. "Dad, tell me that's not true." I opened my mouth, but the guards were already stepping forward. And in that moment, I realized Jack had just given me my second gift of the night. A very public scene, one I planned to use against him. They marched me out into the freezing Detroit night, like some criminal, the muffled bass of the Gala still thumping through the walls behind me. My coat wasn't even buttoned, but the cold didn't bother me. What burned was a look on Sophia's face, hurt, confused, choosing to stand beside him while I was shoved into the dark. I walked slowly back to my car, breath fogging the air, every step echoing in my head like a drumbeat. I'd been humiliated before in business. Bad deals, tough negotiations, rivals who thought they'd won. But this was different. This wasn't just about me. Jack had stolen the one thing I cherished most, my daughter's trust. And he'd done it with lies. Sitting in the driver's seat, I gripped the wheel until my knuckles went white. Gabriel's words replayed. Guys like Jack, when they're cornered, they bite. He'd bitten, all right, in front of half the city. But here's the thing Jack didn't understand. When you bite too soon, you show the world your teeth. And people remember. For days after, the silence grew thicker. Sophia didn't call, and I didn't push. Pride is a dangerous thing, especially when love is tangled in it. If I stormed in with accusations, I'd lose her for good. But patience? Patience was my oldest ally. Christmas crept closer, the city wrapped in lights and holiday cheer, but I kept my focus razor sharp. I knew Jack would want me at his grand Christmas party, the crown jewel of his season, the stage where he'd flaunt his empire. And if he wanted me there, I'd go, because humiliation is a seed. It doesn't die in the dirt. It grows quietly until the moment it bursts through the surface. And when it did, Jack wouldn't just feel embarrassed. He'd feel exposed. The invitation came wrapped in gold foil, heavier than paper had any right to be. Jack wanted spectacle, wanted me seated like some relic while he basked in applause. And Sophia's note inside, "Please, Dad, come. It means a lot to me," sealed my decision. I wasn't walking into his party as a guest. I was walking in as a storm. In the days leading up, I prepared the way I used before major negotiations. Notes stacked, Gabriel's audit highlighted, client testimonies printed, and folded neatly into my pocket. But more than paperwork, I carried patience. The kind that comes from decades of listening more than talking, waiting until the other man overplays his hand. On Christmas Eve, I shaved close, pressed my best suit, and slipped my old watch on my wrist, the one Sophia gave me when she was 10, engraved with the words for Dad, my hero. That reminder wasn't for Jack. It was for me. The venue was a cathedral of excess. Marble floors polished to a mirror's shine, a towering tree dripping with ornaments that probably cost more than my car, and a jazz band crooning Christmas standards while guests swirled champagne. I entered quietly, but eyes followed me all the same. Jack had made sure of that. Stephen. His voice rang out across the hall, too loud, too rehearsed. He strode toward me in a tuxedo sharp enough to cut glass. I was afraid you wouldn't show. Everyone, this is Sophia's father, the skeptic. Laughter bubbled around the room. I smiled faintly, unshaken. Merry Christmas, Jack. He clapped my shoulder, leaning close. Careful tonight, old man. You're on my stage now. I met his eyes and let the silence hang before answering. Funny thing about stages, Jack, they collapse if the foundation's weak. His grin twitched, just for a second, but then he turned back to crowd, arm raised for another toast. And I knew, as the glasses lifted high, that tonight his mask would slip, and when it did, I'd be ready to rip it clean off. The party swelled with the kind of noise only money can buy. Forced laughter, hollow compliments, the shuffle of waiters trying to mask mistakes with smiles. Jack floated through it all like a showman, his hand glued to Sophia's waist, his voice booming, as if the whole night existed just to echo his name. I stayed near the back, bourbon in hand, watching. I saw the little failures. The overcooked hors d'oeuvres guests discreetly left on napkins, the impatient stares at bartenders drowning in orders, the thin cracks in Jack's empire showing right under the glitter. To the untrained eye, it was flawless. To mine, it was a train wobbling off its rails. Then came the moment. Jack clinked a spoon against his glass, commanding silence. Ladies and gentlemen, he declared, tonight is not just about Christmas. It's about legacy. Lux Events has redefined celebration in Detroit. And with Sophia by my side, the future only gets brighter. Applause rang out, but I noticed a glance he shot at me. This wasn't a toast. It was a challenge. I stepped forward, my voice steady. If legacy is what we're celebrating, Jack, then it should withstand scrutiny. Don't you agree? The crowd shifted, sensing tension. Jack smirked, waving a dismissive hand. Stephen, always a critic. Folks, my future father-in-law has a hard time adjusting to success. Isn't that right? Laughter rippled again, but thinner this time. I let the silence breathe, then spoke louder. Funny thing about success. It doesn't hide behind inflated invoices or unpaid debts. The air snapped tight. Heads turned. Sophia's eyes widened, confusion mixing with dread. Jack's smile froze, the mask slipping just enough for everyone to notice. I reached into my jacket pocket, fingers brushing the folded report, but I didn't pull it out. Not yet. Timing was everything. Instead, I raised my glass, locking eyes with Jack. To truth, I said. The room was silent, waiting, and Jack knew, for the first time, that I wasn't bluffing. Jack laughed. Too loudly, trying to shatter the silence I just carved into the room. Truth, he scoffed, raising his glass higher. The truth is, some men can't stand to see the next generation rise. They cling to the past, to their outdated ways, because it's all they've got left. A few guests chuckled politely, but the energy had shifted. I could feel it, eyes darting between him and me, whispers starting to bubble beneath the music. Even the band hesitated on their next note. I let him have his moment. Then I spoke, calm, measured. Outdated ways? Maybe. Or maybe just experience. The kind that sees through polished lies. The crowd went still again, that fragile quiet before a storm. Jack's jaw tightened. He wanted control back, and so he went for the jugular. You hear this, Sophia? He said, turning toward her, his voice dripping false pity. Your father can't stand to let you be happy. He's jealous. Try to poison tonight like he's poisoned every moment since we met. Sophia flinched, caught in the crossfire. My chest ached watching her, but I didn't waver, because this wasn't just between him and me anymore. This was about everyone in that room seeing him for what he truly was. I stepped forward, closing the gap. My voice cut through the air, steady as steel. I'm not here to poison anything. I'm here to protect my daughter from a man who builds empires out of smoke. A gasp rippled through the guests. Jack's face flushed crimson, his hand tightening around his glass until it nearly shattered. He leaned in close, voice low enough only I could hear. You're playing with fire, old man. I didn't blink. Good. Fire as a way of burning down what shouldn't stand. He recoiled, forced a plaster on another grin for the audience. But his eyes told the truth. He was rattled. And that was my opening. Because a man who's rattled always makes his biggest mistake next. The band tried to pick the room back up with a jazzy rendition of Silent Night, but the tension clung to the air like smoke after a kitchen fire. Guests smiled too wide, laughed too loud, pretending nothing had happened, but their eyes kept flicking back to us. Jack knew it, too. His steps grew sharper, his grip on Sophia tighter, like a man clutching a rope that was already fraying. I let him stew. Patience had always been my greatest weapon. Then it came, the mistake Gabriel had warned me about. Jack climbed onto the small stage near the tree, microphone in hand, spotlight catching the sweat starting to bead on his forehead. Ladies and gentlemen, he boomed, ignore the distractions. Tonight is about celebration, not baseless accusations. His gaze stabbed in my direction, his smile brittle. Lux Events is stronger than ever. And anyone suggesting otherwise is, well, let's just say they're living in the past. A murmur spread to the crowd, doubt, unease. He'd pushed too hard, too soon. I took a step forward, letting my voice carry without the aid of a microphone. Stronger than ever? I said, is that why your creditors call twice a week? Why clients are still waiting for refunds from last summer? Why vendors whisper about unpaid bills? The room went silent, the kind of silence that makes even the chandeliers seem to listen. Jack froze. His polished mask cracked wide open for the first time. You're lying, he hissed into the mic, but the tremor in his voice betrayed him. I reached into my jacket, pulled out one folded sheet of Gabriel's report, and held it high enough for the nearest guest to see. This isn't gossip. It's fact. Numbers don't lie, Jack, but men do. Gasps erupted. Sophia's hand flew to her mouth. The band stopped playing altogether. And in that suspended moment, Jack's empire didn't glitter anymore. It wobbled. One more push, and the whole facade would come crashing down. Jack's face drained of color, but pride made him reckless. He snatched the microphone tighter, his voice cracking under the weight of forced bravado. You think you can stand here and smear my name with a piece of paper? This man is bitter, jealous, irrelevant. He doesn't understand what it means to win. The crowd stirred uneasily. Some whispered. Others stared at me, searching for confirmation. Sophia's eyes glistened, darting between us, torn, desperate for truth. I took a slow step toward the stage, unfolding another page from Gabriel's report. My voice carried firm and calm, cutting clean through Jack's bluster. Winning, Jack? Is that what you call maxing out credit lines to throw parties you can't pay for? Is that what you call charging couples double, then delivering cold food and broken promises? A murmur swept across the hall, like wind through dry leaves. Guests shifted uncomfortably. A few nodding. They'd lived those very complaints. Jack's hand trembled around the mic. He turned to the crowd, voice desperate. Don't listen to him. He's twisting everything, trying to ruin Christmas for his own daughter. That was his third mistake. He dragged Sophia into it. I looked straight at her, my voice soft but steady. Sophia, you know me. I built my life on one thing, protecting my family. I wouldn't be standing here if I wasn't certain. He's not protecting you. He's using you to prop up a collapsing empire. Her breath caught, and for the first time, doubt flashed across her face. The room felt it too. Jack saw it and panicked. He slammed the mic down with a screech, storming off the stage and grabbing a bottle of champagne from a passing waiter. He popped the cork with a shaky hand, spraying foam, forcing a laugh. "A toast," he barked. "To Lux Events, still the best in the game." But his voice wavered, and the fizz dripping down his sleeve looked more like sweat than celebration. And that's when I realized the room wasn't laughing with him anymore. They were watching him unravel. The champagne dripped from Jack's sleeve as he raised a bottle high, pretending control he no longer had. The room was silent now, every guest measuring the way wolves measure a limping deer. Even Sophia had stepped back a little, her eyes darting between him and me, as though seeing both of us clearly for the first time. I let the silence breathe. Then I stepped closer, my voice carrying steady and low, the way a judge delivers a verdict. "You call this winning, Jack? Spraying champagne while your staff goes unpaid? You think glitter hides debt? You think arrogance makes up for failure?" A ripple moved through the crowd. Nods, murmurs. Trudes remembered. I saw a man in the back whisper to his wife, recognition flashing across his face. Another guest folded his arms, scowling at Jack. The tide was turning. Jack slammed the bottle onto a table, glassware rattling. "Enough. This is my night, my company, my future. You don't belong here, Stephen. You never did." I smiled faintly. Funny thing about belonging. Respect earns it. Deception loses it. I held up the report one final time, then set it on the table beside the toppled champagne, the pages fanning out like open wounds. Numbers don't care about tuxedos, Jack. They don't care about speeches or toasts. They tell the truth, whether you like it or not. The crowd pressed closer, whispers swelling into judgment. Jack looked around, desperate for a lifeline, but there were none left. His mask had slipped too far, and everyone had seen the man underneath. Sophia's voice broke the air, trembling but firm. "Jack, is it true?" Jack froze. His lips parted, but no words came. And in that moment, the room belonged to me. Because sometimes revenge isn't about striking hard. It's about letting the truth do the cutting. Jack's silence was louder than any confession. His mouth open, closed, then open again, like a fish gasping for air. But the crowd didn't wait. Whispers turned sharp, accusations slicing through the ballroom. A woman near the front said, "That's exactly what happened at my event." A man muttered, "I told you it was a scam." The chorus grew, each voice another nail in the coffin of his empire. Sophia's hand trembled as she lowered her champagne glass. Her eyes, wide and shining, found mine across the room. And in that moment, I saw it, the spell breaking. Jack had lost her. He lunged for me, rage twisting his face. But two waiters stepped in instinctively, holding him back. "Get your hands off me," he shouted, his voice cracking. The once golden boy of Detroit, now reduced to a spectacle, flailing in front of the very people he'd spent years trying to impress. I didn't move. I didn't need to. Justice was already unfolding. Instead, I reached into my pocket and pulled out my old watch, holding it in my palm where Sophia could see. The inscription caught the light. "For Dad, my hero." A reminder of who I'd always been, not perfect, not rich, but steady. I looked at her and spoke softly, though the whole room heard. "Sweetheart, this is who I am," and that I gestured toward Jack, struggling against his own mess. "That's who he is." Her eyes filled, and she nodded once. Small but enough. She walked away from him, away from the glittering lies, and crossed the room to stand beside me. The room erupted, not in applause, but in judgment. Guests turned their backs on Jack. His father, Joshua, pale with fury, stormed out without a word. The band quietly packed up. Lux Events had collapsed in a single night. I slipped the watch back on my wrist, feeling its weight like a seal of closure. Because revenge isn't always about fire and fury. Sometimes it's about letting a man's own pride set the trap and watching him fall straight through it. And that night, as snow fell softly outside, I knew I hadn't just saved my daughter. I'd kept my promise. If you like this story, please like this video. Subscribe to the channel and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the right.